Hello, everyone. Really great to be here with you. Like every week, this is Sabrina Paganoni, and I'm speaking from the Healy Center for ALS at Mass General. I'm here with our patient navigation team, Catherine Small and Alison Bullat. So thank you for being here. I see that people are joining from the waiting room, so welcome, everyone. Always great to see familiar names on the list as well as new names. So welcome to everyone. So if we can go to the next slide. So tonight, actually, I will ask Catherine to introduce our new video, or I would say reformatted video. So Catherine?
Sure. So this is kind of in celebration of the milestone of kind of the first phase of this trial coming to completion, with the results coming in for the first few regimens. And when we launched the trial in July of 2020, there was a launch video talking about, that we're introducing 3 regimens. And so, a lot has happened in the past 2 years, and we've redone the video a little bit just to kind of bring it up to date and reflect more accurately the current status of the trial. So I think it's just a brief 3, maybe 3.5 minutes, and we can play that for you now.
Something new is here in the fight against ALS. The first ever ALS platform trial, designed to accelerate the development of effective and breakthrough treatments for people with ALS. So what's different about the HEALEY ALS platform trial? Instead of testing just one drug, the HEALEY ALS platform trial can evaluate one or more drugs at the same time and will keep testing new treatments as they are discovered. This means more opportunities to find groundbreaking therapies in a faster time frame. Imagine having to build a new dock every time a different ship came to port with new treatment cargo. This is how traditional trials work. In platform trials, there is one dock to receive all the cargo and connect the treatments to their final destinations. Central infrastructure can be shared among therapies. And because different treatments are tested using a common master protocol, placebo data can be shared. In other words, patients have a far greater chance of receiving active treatment than in traditional trials. The HEALEY ALS platform trial began with 3 drugs selected by an expert evaluation committee. While therapy assignment to patients is random, each drug has an equal chance of success based on scientific evidence reviewed by the researchers. Promising new drugs will be added as soon as they are ready. The trial operates across an expanding network of coordinated sites nationwide. Working as a team, increasing access for patients. More data, faster results, lower chance of placebo, breakthrough progress. ALS doesn't wait, and neither can we. The HEALEY ALS platform trial is active now. We will continue to test new treatments. We will increase patient access to potentially life-changing therapies. We will drive the development of new biomarkers until we find the cures for all people with ALS.
Thank you for this. I want to acknowledge the people with ALS who gave feedback on the video, on the initial launch of the video. So if we can go to the next slide, really, we wanted to capture the fact that, well, we opened with 3 drugs. We actually expanded over time, and now we are testing 5 drugs. We've been testing 5 drugs, and we are working on adding a few more for 2023. And so the point of, as you've seen in the video, the point of the trial is to screen drugs rapidly and efficiently. We want to get solid answers so that we know what to do next. Next slide. So we are doing that by leveraging a master protocol, which is a common protocol for multiple regimens. And when I say regimen, I mean a different drug. So the ones that have colors are the ones that have been included so far. But again, we are right now we're setting up regimens F and G, and we have more under consideration for inclusion next year as well. Next slide. So each regimen or each drug is tested using a common schema. And so far, the sample size of each regimen has been 160 participants, randomized 3-to-1 active to placebo, meaning that there are more participants on active drug compared to placebo. And then at the end of the treatment period of 6 months, there is an open label extension where all participants can get access to active drug. I do want to mention that obviously in 2022, we've also seen other events in ALS, as well as the approval of 2 new drugs, oral edaravone and Relivrio, more recently. And for this reason, again, the sample size of future regimens may be affected by that, because every time we change standard of care, we basically need to re-estimate and re-evaluate how to test new drugs on top of standard of care. Next slide. And so the endpoints that we have shared so far in these webinars and in other presentations, we are collecting a number of measures for every participant that participates in the trial. And so specifically, the primary endpoint is the change in disease severity through 24 weeks, which is about 6 months. And that's collected by testing the ALSFRS-R, which is a functional rating scale accounting for mortality. We do measure other important endpoints, such as respiratory function, muscle strength, safety, obviously. And we do have a collection of a number of biomarkers and exploratory endpoints, which are very important for us to learn more about ALS. So if you can click one more time, I do want to mention that so far what we have shared publicly are results that are so-called top-line results. So top-line results basically means the most important, or kind of the primary results from each regimen. However, we are still in the process of analyzing biomarkers and exploratory endpoints. So we truly don't have the results yet because the volume of data, given the number of biomarkers and the complexity of the biomarkers that we have been testing for each of the regimens is really high. And so in addition to genetics, neurofilaments, many other biomarkers, and as well as voice recordings and home spirometry, which is a measure of respiratory function in the home environment, the data points for this trial, really, again, we have so much data that we're still in the process of analyzing these additional biomarkers and exploratory endpoints, as well as subgroup analysis, to be able to tell if there are differences by subgroup or specific clinical characteristics. Again, that's still ongoing. Next slide. So specifically, again, here, I want to focus on the fact that we are collecting really a wealth of information that's very important, not only for the regimens that we're testing right now, but also for our knowledge about ALS in general. And we are also working on adding new biomarkers and more biomarkers for the next few regimens. Many of you are familiar with the ROTS, which is a patient-reported outcome that will be included in the next few regimens. And we're working on additional biosamples, potentially including PBMCs or other kind of blood-based measures in future regimens. Next slide. So if you want to listen to the top-line results for the first few regimens, and we have shared them in these calls, and so all of them are available and recorded on our website. Next slide. So right now we are still working on other regimens that are still active. Regimens D is ongoing, so I expect that we will have results in the coming months. I do want to focus for today on regimen E, which is enrolling new participants right now. So if we can go to the next slide. The regimen that we are enrolling new participants for right now is regimen E, testing Trehalose or SLS-05. This is a molecule that is available in nature. Humans cannot make it, but they can metabolize it. The problem is that when you take Trehalose by mouth, which is basically a sugar compound, it's not absorbed because it's broken down by enzymes in the gastrointestinal system. So it's very different when we administer it by intravenous administration, meaning an injection in the veins, to bypass again the gastrointestinal system. We know from previous studies, specifically from preclinical studies, that IV administered Trehalose can get into the muscle and the brain. And when tested in animal models of ALS, such as the SOD1 mouse model, in different independent experiments, it was treatment with Trehalose was associated with better outcomes, again, in these mouse models. And that's why we're testing it now in people with ALS to see if that also replicates in people, hoping that it can help slow down the disease and improve outcomes also in people with ALS. Next slide. If you want to hear more about this, again, we have been having a series of webinars to explain more about the science and also what it means to be part of Regimen E. So I would refer you to the recording of that webinar to learn more about what it means to participate in Regimen E. I would say that we have, we have rolled out the trial Regimen E at multiple sites, and even if it's an intravenous infusion, we have a home nursing service that's been working quite well. Next slide. And so far, we randomized over 100 individuals within Regimen E, and I would say that we are really eager to complete enrollment for this regimen, because the sooner we complete enrollment, the sooner we can tell if this drug works for ALS or not. So I would like to thank you, all of you. I know every week we have a few participants who send us messages that they are participating in this trial. So thank you so much if you're one of them, and if you're considering participation again, that would be a great contribution to ALS, and hopefully we'll learn more about this drug very soon. Next slide. So these are the sites actually that are activated for Regimen E, and in the video we updated the sort of the map of activated sites, because when we started, actually we had a smaller network of sites. We had the blue sites, but then we added the green sites, and they continue to get activated and included in the network. And the reason for that was that because there was enthusiasm both from patients and sites to enroll and participate in this innovative trial. And so really, since the beginning, since we first launched the video, we continue to add new drugs, but also new sites, with the goal of bringing the trial closer to where people live. Next slide. So I do want to touch upon expanded access, because we're also in the process of doing more expanded access in parallel to the platform trial. I do want to mention that the expanded access are not clinical trials, although they are FDA regulated, and providing drug via EAPs should not interfere with clinical trials. So by definition, EAPs are only meant for people with ALS who are not eligible for clinical trials. So I really want to differentiate. So to the group of people that can participate in Regimen E, that's a formal clinical trial where we can actually tell if the drug works or not. And that's a separate group of people from the people who are not eligible for different clinical reasons to participate in Regimen E or other trials. And therefore, if they cannot participate in those formal trials, we are opening up new options to access drugs via expanded access, as long as per FDA guidance, they don't, that type of process doesn't interfere with clinical trials. Next slide. So we actually have gained quite a bit of experience with EAPs in general as a companion to the platform trial. Those initial programs for the initial regimens were small. You can see here a few facts about that. We actually collaborated with philanthropy, many donors. I know some of them are on the line. So thank you so much for making this possible, because really this was really a big change in ALS. So there were not many EAPs at all in ALS, prior to some of these initiatives, and really because of patient advocacy and people who actually donated money to really sort of jumpstart this new model, we were able to open a small EAP companion for the first 3 drugs at 10 sites for a small group of people at the sites listed here. And so essentially, we were able to kind of, show kind of in this proof of concept initiative that it was possible to really run EAPs in parallel to the platform trial, or in parallel to a large clinical trial, without interfering with it. So this was a very important proof of concept. And that really prepared us for the next step. So if you can go to the next slide. which was to leverage the Act for ALS law that was signed into law in December of 2021. And so the NIH released a series of applications for research grants. And in particular, at the end of September, so it was on September 30th, we received a grant to offer the drug that we're testing in Regimen E to patients via an EAP, again, only for people who are not eligible for the trial itself. Next slide. So thanks to the grant that we just received less than a month ago, we're now starting up the program, and we are expected to enroll the first participants in this EAP in Q1 of 2023. This will be available at many more sites than any other EAP. So it will be available at 25 sites. Before we could only, with limited resources, we could only offer that at a limited number of sites. And so we're starting to again work on this to offer this option to patients who are not eligible for the trial with NIH funding. And we are also collecting important safety and biological data from the participants. So the idea is to really show that we can actually do this type of process and also learn from it while we do it. So I think that's going to be very important for the field. So thank you so much for all of you who advocated for Act for ALS and kind of really innovation in the field. And so we're really, really thankful and really thrilled to be working on all of this. Next slide. If you have any questions about anything I discussed, I know I went really fast because really we want to leave time for questions, but I'm really grateful that Catherine and Alison are available outside of these webinars as well to answer your questions. And I do want to note that next week we will be away for our annual research conference of the NILS Consortium. So unfortunately, we will literally be flying at that time. And so we have to cancel the next week's webinar. And then we have another cancellation in November for another good reason for Thanksgiving. So apologies for those cancellations, but other than those 2 dates, we will definitely offer the webinar in November as well. And with that, I think we can stop sharing the slides. And I see a comment about the video. Thank you so much for your words of appreciation. So again, we really have great patient advocates and advisors that really provide a lot of input on the on videos and other materials. So feel free to keep sending suggestions. Thank you so much. So there's a question here about Regimen C specifically, and the question is that as previously discussed in previous webinars, Regimen C did not meet the primary or secondary endpoints, but there was a survival signal. And so the question is, was there any other signal in particular subgroups, for example, people with limb onset or bulbar onset? So that's exactly what we're looking at right now. So what I tried to show earlier was that sort of the top line results that were released so far are sort of the primary results, and they are on the overall population. So right now we're working on a number of other analyses, including subgroup analysis, in addition to all the biomarkers. So I'm sorry, I literally don't have the answer to that, but again, we're working on that, and definitely we will share that when available. So question about the EAP: when do you expect to basically enroll participants and activate sites for the EAP of Regimen E? So we now have a target in the first quarter of 2023. And the reason for that, well, there's a couple of reasons for that. So first of all, this is still a weekly intravenous infusion. So we do need to contract with home infusion nurses and have all the processes in place to be able to offer this drug. So we are hoping to dose the first people in hopefully January or February, but it could be March. Again, all of this depends on contracts and all the processes for again, being able to run these at 25 sites. So again, I think January through March 2023. And the question, there's a good question about whether data is collected as part of EAPs. So EAPs, and there is another question related to that from somebody who has low progression of the disease, and the question is, how would that affect the results? So that's a both are great questions. So as you know, there are inclusion-exclusion criteria for the main trial, for the formal trial. The EAP instead is broader. And so, yes, we accept people who are slow progressors. And yes, if we were to use the EAP to try to tell if the drug works or not, that would be very hard because there is a lot of variability among the participants in the EAP. However, there's other types of data that can be collected. We collect, data also, comprehensive data from the EAP, and specifically the conclusions that we can make are on safety, biomarkers, etc. So yes, we do collect data. We do allow people that have slow progression, and the data will be used again in a different way. The only way to be able to tell if the drug works or not is by running a randomized clinical trial. So the main regimen E. I just want to be very clear. The EAP supplements that, but does not substitute the critical importance of regimen E or any other clinical trial. So so the question, there's a few questions about sort of Trehalose, what's the expectation for Trehalose and what's the mechanism of Trehalose. So I want to take both together. So first of all, and I really love that somebody's mentioning the 3 Rs, which is the new standard of care, Riluzole, Radicava, and Relivrio. So right now we have 3 drugs approved for ALS, and they actually work on different mechanisms of action. So we think that this cocktail approach, giving more than one drug that targets different aspects of the disease, given the current state of the science, is the way to go. And so we, again, the new standard of care includes multiple drugs. Now, Trehalose, which is tested in regimen E, works on yet another mechanism of action. So it's not duplicative of the 3 Rs, the other drugs that are already on the market. It's actually another mechanism. It's a mechanism called autophagy that basically really helps keep the cells healthy. And so really by working on that other mechanism, we hope that it will slow down the disease. We don't know how effective it will be. The only way to tell really is by completing the regimen E trial, and so that's why it's so important to include all participants and finish enrollment. So a few questions. There's a question about Yale, if Yale is one of the sites. So I'll ask you, Catherine, to check, because now we are up to 74 sites in the entire network, and so I had to say I don't remember right now if Yale is part of the network. I just don't remember if it's already active on regimen E. So if you could check on that.
So at this time, they're not, but we're keeping an eye on them over the next month to see what type of progress is made.
Yeah, so let me see which sites will have EAPs. So because the EAP for Trehalose is a companion to regimen E, it will be a group of sites that are part of regimen E, because it wouldn't sort of make sense to kind of have it at other sites. So the sites that are already experienced with regimen E, with the drug itself, and they will be included, a group of them will be included in the EAP. I would say that we have room for about 25 sites. We asked all sites that are active in regimen E to let us know if they want to participate in the EAP. And so we're making those decisions right now. We're looking at the applications. And again, it will be a group of sites that participate in regimen E. Some sites may prefer not to participate in the EAP because of bandwidth issues. So, so again, it really depends on whether the sites can accommodate this particular, new EAP. So a question about different, the fact that now we have multiple approved drugs. How do we stratify for that? So basically what I mentioned, and last week I made a comment about stratification. So essentially what happens is that once a new regimen starts, so for example, regimen F or G, at that point we know that there are 3 drugs that are on the market. And so when participants are enrolled and they are assigned to active or placebo, there is a mechanism called stratification in our interactive randomization system that allows us to assign roughly the same number of people on active or placebo based on their background treatment, so that we don't have imbalances in the use of other medications. So, for example, we wouldn't want to have more people on active that are on the 3 drugs than the ones that are on placebo. We want the percentage of people on Riluzole, Relivrio, and Radicava to be roughly the same between active and placebo. And so there is a whole statistical system that basically allows for that, and that's called stratification. So we want to ensure that there is balance between active and placebo in terms of percentage of people taking these drugs. Trying to look for different questions, just making sure I take all of them. So there's a question about neurofilament light and what is neurofilament light. So neurofilament light is a protein basically that gets released by the nerve cells when they are damaged. Now, normally in a functioning nerve cell, they have important structural functions. So they are important to keep the structure of the cell. But if there is a problem, like for example, if there are some cellular mechanisms that, like those in ALS, that cause the loss of these nerve cells, the neurofilament proteins get released in the spinal fluid and then in the blood, and so we can measure them, and that's essentially a way to measure the amount of neuronal damage that's going on. And so the hope is that if we give people a drug that works, then their neuronal damage will be less, and then we will be able to measure that by using neurofilament levels as well. So that's why we're measuring these in all participants. Now, I would say that there are still a lot of complexities and details around neurofilaments, and so what their significance is, etc. So I just want to make sure that it's a very complicated topic, and certainly one that's still evolving, but certainly it's important to measure it. So there's a question about allowance of Relivrio in regimen E. So I just want to clarify at this time, people are not on Relivrio yet because physically speaking, it's not available yet, although people are working on the prescription. So we are actively working on prescriptions and the insurance approval process. And so again, right now our preference is that people who are in regimen E wait to start the drug and when they start the open label extension. However, if that's not possible for a number of reasons, in consultation with their physician, they could start, and that would be marked as a protocol deviation or violation. Again, I would recommend you to talk to your investigator, and actually if your investigator has questions, they could reach out directly to me, because we have made final decisions, and so there's been some communication, so they're welcome to reach out to me. And also, well, the reason we won't have the webinar next week is because we have this in-person conference, and so obviously I would be happy to talk to your physician as well in person. I'm just trying to look at other questions. I think we took most of them. And then other questions about the neuroinflammation. So if it's something that's potentially important in ALS, well, I would say that there's a lot of evidence suggesting that neuroinflammation is important in ALS. I think that the jury is still out in terms of whether it can completely, whether targeting neuroinflammation can reduce, if not stop, the progression of ALS. We don't know that yet. There are certainly a lot of trials that are looking into this. Great. So I think those were all the main questions. And then actually I see a question about how long it takes to do a weekly infusion for regimen E. So the infusions are generally about 1 hour, the actual infusion. Now, obviously, for people who have the infusion at the site, they have to go to the site and stay there a little bit longer for that. I do want to mention that after the first few infusions, people can do it at home. So it's basically a 1 hour weekly infusion at home for the majority of people. Again, after the first few, we ask that people do the first few infusions at the center to monitor the safety, making sure that they don't have any allergic reaction or anything like that, and that then they can transition home. So I think that was all the questions. And again, I'm sorry we won't see you next week, but certainly the week after, and we'll have research news from our conference. So thank you so much. Thank you.